Welcome back to the next chapter of our journey. If you're just tuning in, this is part 5 of the story. I highly recommend starting from part 1 to catch all the twists and turns. You can find the link to part 1 in the top right corner. For those who've been following along, things are about to get even more intense. Let's dive in. You know, the mayor of Clearbrook and I, Lydia Cain, we grew up together. We were like brothers back then, running through these woods, getting into trouble. His family was always well off, a big name in this town long before Henry became mayor. The creepy house you mentioned, that was their family home, standing tall and eerie even back then. I never liked going there. Not because of their Rottweiler or the fact that his mother wouldn't let us drink soda, it was because of Lydia. Lydia? Tommy asked, breaking the silence. Henry's grandmother, Uncle Dale replied. She wasn't just mean, she was something else entirely. The kind of woman who could freeze your soul with a glance. Always hunched over, muttering things under her breath. Stuff you couldn't understand. She'd have these fits, start shouting, breaking things. But it wasn't just her temper. It was the way she looked at you, like she was studying you, deciding something about you. And then there were the rumors. Rumors? I pressed. People said Lydia had been old for as long as anyone could remember. Like she didn't age the way normal folks did. But back then, folks were superstitious, always talking nonsense about witches and curses. I didn't think much of it, not until years later. It was a night just like this, he began, his voice low and steady. Rain pouring down, thunder rumbling in the distance. I was about your age, Tommy. Just a dumb kid who thought the scariest thing in the world was a big spider. I didn't know any better. He paused, rubbing his hands together as if trying to shake off the chill of a memory. I woke up to Henry standing at the foot of my bed. Scared the hell out of me, too. I didn't even hear him come in. Just opened my eyes, and there he was, soaking wet from the rain. How did he even get in? Greg asked. That's what I asked him, Uncle Dale said. But he wouldn't answer. Just kept saying I had to get up, had to leave town right now. I thought he was pulling some prank or something, but then I saw his face. He was serious. More serious than I'd ever seen him. I told him my parents were out at their dance class and would be back soon. That's when he grabbed my arm and said something I'll never forget. He said, "They're not at dance class, Dale. It's all a lie." Me and the others exchanged uneasy looks. Dance class. That's what our parents had told us, too. I didn't know what the hell he was talking about, Uncle Dale continued, but he looked terrified. I told him he was scaring me, and he said, "You should be scared. If you don't leave town tonight, you're going to die like everyone else." The room fell silent, except for the crackle of the lantern. I didn't know what to believe, Uncle Dale said, but I could see in his eyes that he wasn't joking, so I went with him. We got into his car and drove out into the rain. I noticed Henry had packed it up. Blankets, food, clothes. It wasn't just some wild idea, he'd been planning this. Henry wouldn't let me drive through town. He kept us on back roads, barely lit, barely traveled. And then, about halfway out of town, I saw it. I tensed. It looked human at first, Uncle Dale said. But as the headlights hit it, I could see the way it moved. The skin, dark, oily, its limbs were too long, its joints all wrong. I hit the brakes so hard we almost skidded off the road. "A lurker," Tommy whispered. "Yeah," Uncle Dale nodded grimly. "But here's the thing. It didn't attack us. I was panicking, telling Henry we needed to turn around, but he just got out of the car. I yelled at him to stop, but he wouldn't listen. He walked right up to it." "What happened?" I asked. Uncle Dale's voice dropped. It looked at him, and then it backed off, just slinked away into the trees like some trained dog. That's when Henry turned to me and said, They won't touch me. I shivered at the thought. He started talking after that, Uncle Dale continued. Told me everything about his family, how they weren't normal, how they'd never been normal. He said it all went back to his grandmother, Lydia. She wasn't just some cranky old woman, she was the one who started it all. Started what? Greg asked. The cult, Uncle Dale said. She was the one who brought everyone together. She convinced them it was for protection, for prosperity, but it wasn't just prayers they were offering. Every 18 years they'd leave their kids behind while they went to their so-called dance class. Only it wasn't a dance class, it was a cult. The group froze. Henry had only learned about it recently at that time, Uncle Dale explained. He'd overheard something he wasn't supposed to, and when he confronted his parents, they didn't deny it. They just tried to convince him to go along with it, to carry on the family legacy. But he refused, Uncle Dale continued, and he tried to save me, told me to take the car and leave town. I begged him to come with me, but he wouldn't. He said he had to stay behind, to find out what was really going on and stop it if he could. That's when we parted ways. The room was so quiet that the ticking of Uncle Dale's watch sounded like thunder. But that's obviously not where it ends, he said finally. It was years later, after the army, after everything I saw over there, I just wanted to settle down. A normal life. I met Beth, married her, and figured we'd find somewhere quiet to start over. Clearbrook, it popped into my head. And I don't know why I even thought of it. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe guilt, hell, maybe I just needed answers. Tommy shifted in his seat, and Uncle Dale caught it. I know what you're thinking. Why come back here, right? I ask myself that every damn day. He sighed. But I did. Beth and I moved here, and I didn't tell her, didn't tell anyone about what happened that night. I thought it was done. His voice cracked, just barely, but he swallowed it down. The town looked good, better than I remembered, and when I found out Henry was mayor, I felt relieved, thought maybe he'd really fix things, you know? So I went to see him. Uncle Dale leaned back, shaking his head with a bitter smile. I'll tell you this much, seeing him again, after all those years, it felt right. We hugged, laughed, caught up on life like nothing ever happened, but it did happen, and I couldn't let it go. So I asked him, point blank, what the hell happened that night? Henry told me everything, or at least I thought he did. Said after I left, it got bad, real bad. Friends died, some of the town too. He told me his grandmother, Lydia, was into some dark stuff. Occultism, rituals, curses, the whole 9 yards. Said she cursed the family, cursed the town, and he broke it, or so he said. Tommy flinched. I believed him, Dale said, voice sharper now. I wanted to believe him. I was so damn relieved to hear it was over. He even took me out to the graveyard, showed me our parents' graves, told me how they died cleaning up the mess. Said some of the townsfolk were still believers, but they handled it. Made it sound like a clean break. Greg shifted uncomfortably. And you bought that? I had to, Uncle Dale snapped. Then his voice softened. I had to. You don't know what it's like living such a life, leaving everyone behind at a young age. I needed it to be over. The room went quiet again. But it wasn't. He looked at me, then Tommy. One night, Beth hands me this letter, says Henry sent it, inviting us to a dance class. Tommy's face went pale, and we all exchanged worried glances. Beth knew something was wrong, could see it all over me, but I didn't tell her. I just said I had to talk to Henry, and that I'd explain when I got back. He paused, staring at the floor like it might open up and swallow him. I found Henry, confronted him, threw the damn letter at him and demanded answers, and that's when I saw it. He wasn't the same Henry I grew up with. His face, the way he smiled, cold, like he was looking through me. Uncle Dale clenched his fists. He told me the truth, or at least the part he wanted me to know. He never broke the curse, because to him it wasn't a curse. It was power, control. He said those creatures, the lurkers, the darklings as he called them, they weren't just monsters. The people in this town are divided in 3 factions: immune, lurker, and survivor. Immune? Greg asked. Every 18 years, those who have been infected turn into lurkers, he said. The people who are either immune or lucky enough to survive the last time gather around in the church. The children of each parent are left behind. Those who survive or are even immune can come to church next time. Those who are infected stay in the city, and as soon as it gets dark, they transform. Their job is to infect and hunt. So there is a possibility that one of these creatures you encountered was even one of your parents. No way, Kev shouted. Uncle Dale just kept going, his voice shaking now. He also told me his grandmother, Lydia, was still alive, barely aging. Said she's the source of it all, like a broodmother, keeping the cycle going, and he wasn't stopping with this town. He wanted more darklings, more control. He had everyone in his pocket, the law, the council, even the damn church. Tommy's voice broke through. And he just told you all of this? Uncle Dale nodded. Said I'd be his right hand, help him. Said we could be kings. What did you say? Tommy asked. I said no, Uncle Dale snapped. Told him to stop it before it went too far, but he just laughed and said it was already too late. He paused, his voice barely above a whisper. So I ran home. The room fell deathly silent. When I got home, I found Beth shot, dead on the floor. I couldn't save her. Since I refused his offer, he took her from me. Dale's voice cracked, and he had to take a moment. I knew I couldn't fight Henry alone. Not with those things, not with Lydia still out there keeping the curse alive. So I packed up, sold everything I had, and moved out to the farm, off the grid. Why didn't you just leave? He looked up at Uncle Dale, his face hard, but his voice trembling. If you knew all of this, about the town, about Henry, why didn't you just pack up and get the hell out of here? Uncle Dale hesitated. For the first time since he started talking, he looked nervous, like he didn't want to say what came next. Why I never left, he finally said, looking Tommy in the eye. Well, I wanted to leave, but I just couldn't. He took my Beth from me. There was no way I was going to leave without taking my revenge. Uncle Dale paused for a moment before he spoke up again. And I couldn't leave because of you, Tommy. Tommy blinked, confused. What are you talking about? Uncle Dale swallowed hard. Tommy, I'm not your real uncle. The room went dead quiet. Tommy froze, like the words hit him before he could even process them. What? I'm not your uncle, Uncle Dale repeated, softer this time. Not by blood. Tommy stood up so fast his chair nearly fell over. What the hell does that mean? Uncle Dale sighed and ran a hand through his hair. It means you were left with me, Tommy. Someone brought you to me. Your real mom. Tommy took a shaky step back. My what? No, you can't just... What are you even saying right now? Uncle Dale's voice softened, but the words still felt like bricks. A year after the night I lost Beth, a young woman showed up at my door. She had you in her arms, just a baby, and she begged me to take you in. Tommy's knees felt weak. Me and the others stared in stunned silence, but no one knew what to say. She knew what this town was, what it could do to you, and she wanted to protect you. She couldn't keep you safe herself, not with everything going on, so she left you with me. She sent money, visited as much as she could, but when you got older, she stopped coming around. She was ashamed, Tommy. She couldn't face you." Tommy's voice cracked. "Who is she?" Uncle Dale froze again, but there was no point in holding back now. "Heather Cain, Henry's sister." Tommy's eyes widened. "No. She's your mother, Tommy." "No!" Tommy shouted, backing away. No, that's not possible. What about my father, then?" After he found out she was pregnant, he just left. He couldn't take the burden of raising a child in a town like this. Tommy shook his head, pacing like he could walk away from the truth. "No, this doesn't make any sense." "I'm sorry," Uncle Dale said, his voice raw. "I didn't want to lie to you, but I had to keep you safe. I stayed here because of you. I couldn't leave you behind, not with her still in this town." Tommy stopped pacing and turned to face him. Uncle Dale nodded. "She is against them, and she was trying to protect you. She loves you, and she is very sorry about everything." The room was dead silent after Uncle Dale's revelation. No one knew what to say, especially Tommy, who had stormed off without another word. Uncle Dale stood up, already moving to follow him. "Tommy, wait, just let me explain more." Before he could get any farther, Kev grabbed his shoulder, holding him back. "Dale, don't," Kev said quietly. "Just give him some time." "He needs space," I added. "Let him process this." Uncle Dale's shoulders slumped, his eyes darting toward the hallway where Tommy disappeared. I didn't mean to hurt him. I thought I was protecting him. We get it," Greg interrupted gently. "But you can't fix it right now. Let him breathe." Reluctantly, Uncle Dale sank back into his chair. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and ran a hand down his face. No one spoke for a while. The only sound was the faint hum of the old house settling and the distant rumble of thunder outside. Uncle Dale rubbed his hands together like he was trying to wipe something dirty off them. "There's something I didn't tell you earlier, about the lurkers." "Of course there is," Greg muttered under his breath. Uncle Dale shot him a look but kept talking. "The infection doesn't take hold all at once. At first, they're halfway there, still human, but not really. Their bodies start to change. Yellow eyes, teeth, and claws. They're weaker at first, but don't let that fool you. That's when they're at their most dangerous, because they know what they're doing." "What do you mean?" Ashley asked. "I mean, they're still smart," Uncle Dale said. "Smart enough to trick you, trap you, and the worst part." He paused, letting the weight of it sink in. "Some can still talk." A chill ran through the room. "They're already turning, but they sound just like anyone else," Uncle Dale said. "That's how they get close enough to spit that black sludge and infect you." "Geez," Kev muttered. "But then," Uncle Dale continued, "they evolve. The infection takes over completely. They stop looking human. They bulk up, get faster, stronger, and that's when they stop infecting and just hunt. Because by then, anyone who's still alive isn't worth the trouble of infecting. They're just prey." I clenched my fists. Does that mean that one of the infected was on the 3rd floor hiding, while everyone was partying? Uncle Dale nodded. "Most likely, but you can bet there are more out there that aren't in the early stage anymore." The group fell silent again, the weight of it all hitting us like a sledgehammer. After a moment, I stood up and motioned to Kev and Greg. "Come on," I said. "Let's check on Tommy." Uncle Dale looked up at us. "Tell him I'm sorry." I nodded. "We will." The 3 of us headed towards Tommy's room, leaving the others behind in the dimly lit kitchen. The creak of the floorboards followed us down the hall, and when we reached Tommy's door, I knocked gently. "Tommy, it's us." No answer. I glanced at Kev and Greg before trying the handle. It turned. "Tommy?" I pushed the door open slowly. Inside, Tommy sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. His shoulders were slumped, and his eyes were red, but there were no tears left. He looked up at us, his face hard but tired. The room was quiet, except for the soft creak of the old floorboards as we eased our way into Tommy's room. He was still sitting on the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped, staring blankly at the floor. His face was pale, and his knuckles were white from how tightly his hands were clasped together. Kev took a small step closer. "Your uncle, Dale, he's sorry, man. He didn't mean to drop all that on you like that." Tommy's head snapped up, his eyes sharp. "He's not my uncle." The words came out bitter, almost venomous, and hung in the air like a slap to the face. That's when Greg suddenly snapped. "Are you serious right now?" Tommy flinched, clearly not expecting Greg to lash out. "No, seriously," Greg continued, stepping closer. "Not your uncle? Then who the hell has been taking care of you your whole life, huh? Who fixed your bike when you smashed it into a tree? Who gave you that pocket knife you have been carrying all these years?" Tommy's mouth opened to respond, but Greg wasn't done. "And let's not forget the times you screwed up, like that time you stole beer from Mr. Langston's garage. Remember that? Most parents would have grounded you for weeks. But Dale? He just made you clean out his tool shed and called it even. Didn't even yell at you, because he cares." Tommy looked down again, his hands shaking slightly. Kev stepped forward next. His tone was softer, but his words hit just as hard. "Greg's right, man. My dad would have smacked me upside the head if I'd pulled half the crap you did. And Casey's, don't even get me started." I gave a small nod, confirming it. "But Dale, he stuck with you," Kev said. "Every damn time. He didn't have to. He could have just given you over to someone else or, I don't know, left town like he said he was gonna. But he didn't." Greg chimed back in. "And don't forget, dude, he raised you knowing what this place is. Knowing what could happen if people found out. He stayed for you." Tommy's breathing hitched slightly, but he stayed silent. Then I crouched down in front of him so he couldn't avoid eye contact. "Look, man, we're all messed up right now. This night, it's hell. And finding out about your mom, about Dale, I get it. It's a lot." Tommy swallowed hard but didn't speak. "But here's the thing," I went on. "We've got nobody left. Not our parents, not our teachers, not the police. No one. It's just us. And yeah, Dale might not be your real uncle, but he's more than that, man. Dale is your father." There was a long pause. Then Tommy sniffled and rubbed his eyes quickly, but it was no use. Tears were already forming. He let out a shaky breath and finally whispered, "You guys are such assholes." Greg smirked. "Yeah, we know." Kev grinned and patted his shoulder. "But we're your assholes." And just like that, Tommy broke. The tears came faster, and before anyone could say another word, the four of us collapsed into a group hug. Tommy clung to us, his shoulders shaking as the weight of everything finally hit him all at once. "We are brothers," Kev said. "All of us." What none of us noticed at first was the figure standing in the doorway. Uncle Dale had been there the whole time, silently watching. His eyes were glassy, and his jaw was clenched as he tried to keep it together. When Tommy finally pulled away from the hug, he looked up and saw Dale standing there. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Tommy wiped his face, stood up, and crossed the room. Uncle Dale opened his mouth, but Tommy didn't let him speak. He just stepped forward and threw his arms around him. "I'm sorry," Tommy whispered. Uncle Dale froze, caught off guard, but then his arms came around Tommy, holding him tight. I'm sorry too, kid. I'm so damn sorry. The rest of us stepped back, giving them the moment they needed. When they finally pulled apart, Uncle Dale clapped Tommy on the shoulder. "We're going to figure this out," Dale said firmly. "Together." Tommy nodded. "Yeah, together." I looked at the group and took a deep breath. "All right, let's hash out a plan." They all nodded, the weight of the night still heavy but now tempered by something stronger: resolve. The deeper we go, the more secrets unravel, but the answers only seem to lead to darker questions. If you've been gripped by this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss Part 6. Trust me, this is far from over. I'll see you in the next chapter.